right, welcome to today's episode of Tomorrow's Leader, where we dive deep on all things leader related to leading yourself and leading others. I'm John Laurito, your host, today with a fantastic guest. I've got Mike Mammini here with us. He's the owner of Mammini Company, which is a investment consulting firm based in San Diego that specializes in pension consulting and high net worth clients. Mike and I got a chance to meet a few weeks back, or I guess a month or so back. Mike, great to have you on the show.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, great to see you again. I know we had a nice breakfast out in beautiful San Diego at your country club, so it was a fantastic day. Great way to meet you.
Yeah, not a bad place, right?
No, not a bad place. One of my favorite, I got to say. So, well, I'm glad you could join us for this show. And I there's so much I want to ask you about. I know you've had tremendous success in this industry. And this is a tough industry for listeners that don't really understand the financial services industry. It's very competitive. There's a lot of ways you can build your business. Mike, you've built a business yourself that is in the top fraction of 1% of advisors in the industry, extremely successful. So obviously a lot to share with people. And I'd love to dive in because I know your business didn't always look like this. Obviously it's grown significantly and there were some really key things that helped you do that. So why don't you just take us through a little bit about what the turning points were, what some of the biggest contributors were. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the story?
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing, I had a couple of big things that have really helped. One of them is we have a very specific target audience and clientele that we work with. So it's really a niche market. So that's helped tremendously over the years. It was very difficult to get here, right? Because most people don't do that. In our business, they're very broad-based, work with lots of different clients. And I just made a decision about 20 years ago that I wasn't going to do that. I was really going to focus on just a couple select group of people that I thought we could provide great value to. And we could also make a decent living. And fortunately, that worked. The problem was it worked really well. And so the business just grew and grew and grew. And as it grew and grew and grew, at the time I was probably a one-man shop. And, since then we've grown to, 7 or 8 employees. But the problem was, as it grew, so did my time commitment to the business. And that just was a bummer, right? So I was working 50 or 60, 70 hours a week. It was great, but it was an awful lifestyle. So about 10 years ago, I hired a coach and went over my issues with him. And he said, look, how do you delegate? And I'm like, well, what are you talking about? Delegate. I don't delegate. I do everything myself. He said, well, that's the problem. And so really, the two things that have really helped us is the just focusing on a very select group of people that we like to work with. And then over the last 10 years, I've become a really, really, really good delegator.
So I want to dive into the delegation a lot because that's a huge thing that people struggle with. Every leader, every business owner, I think, struggles with it at some point or another. Before we do, though, let me ask you a question about the niche, because there's also a lot of people that struggle with this. They start a business and they feel like, okay, the best thing I can do is appeal to the largest audience possible. But you found that wasn't the case. Tell us a little bit more about that. Like, why did that make such a big difference for you, and why does that make sense?
Well, I mean, one of the things it did is it allowed you to become an expert with a specific group of people, right? Instead of being, especially in the financial services industry, most people that do what I do are generalists. They work with anybody that's breathing. And that I didn't think we could provide value, and I didn't want to compete extensively on price and that kind of stuff. So I figured if we could separate ourselves and just become an expert in a specific area, and if we were the perceived expert, we still have to be sensitive and provide value. But I thought, number one, we could provide value. And I also thought from a business standpoint, if we could focus like that, it would be much easier to grow, and it would be easier to kind of multiply or grow. We weren't recreating the wheel every time we got a new client.
Yeah.
So that was important. And without knowing that, it also made the whole delegation process a lot easier.
Yeah, I'll bet. How far into it did you develop that niche? I mean, was it early? How early into your business, and what would you recommend for business owners?
No, I mean, I started a long time ago. So the first 10 years in the business, I was what they would consider a disaster, unsuccessful, but I was just trying to do everything, right? So anything anybody wanted to do, I would be interested in it. And so probably 10 years into my career, I had a couple of clients in the niches that we work in. And I just said, you know what, I'm just going to stay here and focus here. And we went backwards for a couple of years. I mean, just to be honest, I mean, income went back, business went back, but we kind of rebooted and said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We just committed to it and said, we're not going to work with everybody. And then, you fast forwarded 5 years later and we were in a really, really good position.
That's awesome. So going to delegation, you said that was one of the big things that kind of changed how you built your business and helped you grow. Obviously, it is a big challenge for people. Do you remember what was the first thing that this coach had you kind of let go of, and what was that like, and what did it do?
It's scary, right? When you delegate. But I'll just give you an example. So this is kind of where I started and kind of where we got to. So when I started, one of the things that my wife and I have always done is we've always been big vacation people. But vacation was great, but I also dreaded it. Because if I went on vacation for 2 weeks, I'd come back to the office and I'd have, 87 voicemails. I'd have a stack of paper this high of mail I had to go through, 3,150 emails I had to get through. Mm-hmm. It was a disaster, right, when I came back. Mm-hmm. But now I always say Tahiti in 2015, when I went to Tahiti for 2 weeks with my wife and 2 kids, I came back, I had 3 voicemails, no mail, and like 5 emails.
Wow.
And so that's the difference, right? The first year it was a disaster. Yeah. And 5 years later, in 2015, I came back and I had nothing to do. In fact, I always joke. I remember that day because when I got back, I went to my office and literally I had no mail. I had no voicemail. I had, no emails. And that day at 2:00, I was golfing. And I just went on vacation 2 weeks.
That's unreal.
And that's delegating.
Yeah.
So, delegating is hard though, right? Because you're giving up something that you've always done, mm-hmm. and you have to allow somebody else to do it. So you have to empower them, trust them, give them guidance, all those kind of things. Yeah. And it's hard. So I gave up everything. I mean, I don't do, the only thing I do now is client acquisition and relationship management. I don't know how to do most things. I don't know how to use Excel. I don't know how to use our client management system. I don't do any paperwork. I don't answer the phone. If I get an email, I usually can forward it to somebody that could take the action. I just don't have to do it. So it took a long time, but over the course of 3 or 4 years of a big commitment to just getting stuff off my plate. And again, just creating a list of things that I don't do.
Mm-hmm. So that was the first step for you. You created that list of the things that you don't want to do anymore.
Yeah. So back to your question, because you asked about the coach. So one of the things that he said is, he just had me take my income. And let's just say at the time I was making $250,000 a year. That meant my time was worth somewhere north of $100 per hour. Mm-hmm. And so he just had me write down all the things that I do. And he said, okay, you answer the phone. Well, answering the phone is, back in the day, it was a $15 an hour job. You could hire somebody for $15 an hour to do that. Paperwork, okay, maybe that's a $30 or $40 an hour job, whatever. So he just had me segment what I did and put dollar values on it. And anything that was less than $100, he said, just you get rid of it. And tell your staff that what you're doing. And so I told my team that here it is. These are things that I'm not going to do anymore. Who's going to do them? If I'm not going to do them, who wants these responsibilities? And it was spread out amongst the team. But they bought in because, number one, I empowered them and I let them kind of own what they were going to own and own what I was going to delegate to them. And so it made it easy. But when you think about, I always joke with my wife because she'll go to Costco to buy gas. And she'll wait in line for 45 minutes to save 5 cents a gallon.
Right.
And I said, honey, you don't put any value in your time. Like, you're spending 45 minutes at the gas station. You go right down the street.
That's so true.
Spend 5 cents more per gallon. You're only buying 20 gallons. That's $1.
Right.
So you're going to save $1 to spend 45 minutes at Costco.
That's so true.
She's like, yeah, Mike, but it makes me feel good. She still does that, by the way, but I couldn't talk her out of that one.
So I love that, though. You got your team together and empowered them to choose what they wanted to do. What if you don't have a team? I mean, you got a lot of business owners out there or maybe they only have one person that they have, because this, I think, is what goes through people's heads. It's gone through my head is, hey, I know how to do this task. I don't know, or I don't think this person has the ability or is going to have the ability to do it. And again, this is just the normal thinking. It's just easier for me to continue doing it. How do you, if you have one person, is it that you got to hire other people, or do you just take a chance and say, okay, I'm going to put this in this person's hand, trust them to do it, give them the guidance? I mean, how do you do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're, and the coach always told me, I mean, one of the things he always said is, he said, if you hire the right people, you never regret hiring them. Right. So, I mean, it's kind of, if you read Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, get the right people on the bus. And then also when you get them on the bus, make sure you put them in the right seat. So from a business standpoint, I have all kinds of different employees with different capacities. So if I give somebody a job, or I delegate something to them and they don't have the mental capacity or whatever capacity they lack, then we're probably going to be unsuccessful. But I think when you delegate, I think the first thing to do is just be clear and let people know what you want done, and let them know why you're delegating it to them. And so kind of empower them. And then I think if you just set expectations and timeframes, so if you give somebody a responsibility and say, hey, John, this is what I want you to do. I know you could do it. I'm excited about you doing it. And today is Wednesday. Let's see if we can have it done by next Tuesday. Mm-hmm. And then just let them know that, hey, I'm here. If you have questions or whatever, I'm here to help. Mm-hmm. And then once they do that, then just encourage, empower, and pat them on the back. Mm-hmm. And they at least my experience was people welcomed it. Mm-hmm. I also ask my employees, what do you think I do that I shouldn't be doing? And they'll let you know, because they'll say, oh, Mike, you do this. There's no reason why you should be doing that. I know you've always done that and you like doing that, but that's like $20 an hour work. Yeah. You shouldn't be doing that. If you just tell your people, even if it's one person, mm-hmm. If you tell people what you're trying to accomplish and they respect you, and you ask them that, look, what are some things that I currently do that you don't think I should do? Trust me, they'll tell you. And those were great. It was great, because they might say, you do that, and I really want to do that, but you would never allow anybody else to do it. It's like, really? I didn't know that. You really want to do that? It's like, yeah, we have a newsletter that I always wrote. And because I was the only one that could write it, because no one could write it as good as I could. That's what I thought, right? Yeah. And a couple people on my team said, I'd love to write the newsletter. It's like, really? Huh. Wow. Well, let's give it a shot. So, it's Wednesday. How about I give you 2 weeks? You write it. And then they write it, I edit it, and we did that for 6 months. And then 6 months later, I'm not even involved in it anymore. It just,
wow. And that wouldn't have happened had they not said that to you. So that was something you just assumed, hey, this is one of my key tasks. I got to do it. It's my unique ability. But little did you know you had somebody on your team that could do it as good.
Exactly. Yeah. They probably even do it better.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. So, and my guess is that also, I mean, you just think about what attracts and keeps great people to a business. Like one of the biggest threats that most businesses have is they lose their great people. They're A players. Oh, sure. And a big reason for that is they're not challenged, or they don't feel like they're tapped into to do enough to reach their potential and really make that big of an impact. And as you're talking, I'm thinking, wow, you probably have noticed that. It's a better ability to attract higher quality people and keep them as well. Not that sometimes you're going to lose people, of course, but my guess is that just keeps your team much more engaged because they're doing more higher level tasks.
It's not only that, that's absolutely true. The other thing it does too is I think it just, it gives them authority on stuff, right? They just take ownership of stuff. And so I think that makes them more, I just think they like their work more if they feel appreciated and they feel like they have authority over certain things. Mm-hmm. And again, I think it all gets back to, I always do these goofy little things my kids would always say, but it's true. And I always use that Jim Collins thing. You really do have to just evaluate who you have on your team. And sometimes they're not the right people. Yeah. And I think sometimes people are just reluctant to make change. Look, I'm the same. You have relationships with employees and they might have been with you for a long time, but I think if you're honest sometimes, maybe they belong on the bus, maybe they don't, but maybe if they do, they kind of should be in the back. like you just, I mean, businesses just have that. I mean, I don't have a big team, and we really haven't had that problem, but I've certainly had to move some people around. And to your point, I think when people get in the right seat, just to use that again, then it's a seat that they're comfortable with. They know they have capacity. They're willing to take on that challenge, and they're willing to take ownership of whatever it is that you're delegating.
Well, and it's interesting because I know many business owners that know they need to make a change with personnel, either a person that needs to get off the bus or move to a different seat, and they've been hesitant to do it. And inevitably, when they finally do it, the rest of the team's response is, well, it's about time. Like that was, long overdue. Or the person themselves even says that, you're totally right. I knew this coming, I knew this was coming. So it's interesting. Sometimes it's just this mental block that we have about, making the change that we need to sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, look, change is uncomfortable, right? I mean, everybody knows that. Nobody likes change. But change can be very productive.
Yeah.
It's always uncomfortable, I mean, we're going through a little bit of change right now in my firm, and it was a little uncomfortable, but the expectation is when we come out the other side, it'll be better.
Yeah, exactly. And what is? Are there times were there times where this backfired, where you delegated either the wrong thing or you realized you went too far or too soon? What happened there?
I don't think I've had anything backfire. I've probably maybe delegated a little too much because it became kind of a session to get rid of stuff. So maybe I got rid of stuff too quick and people made mistakes, but they weren't big mistakes. I mean, they were manageable. And again, I think if you have the right people and they make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. But again, I mean, if you think about what delegation is, it's to give control, responsibility, and authority to someone else. That's a lot, right? Yeah. I mean, think about it. Control, responsibility, and authority to someone else. If it's something that you really enjoy doing, but it's $25 an hour work, I mean, the reality is you shouldn't be doing it because you could be doing something more valuable. Right. So I don't think I've had anything backfire. There's some growing pains when you through that delegation process. But when you get to the other side, again, I mean, now I work, 2.5 days a week. And, when I'm not in the office and when I'm on vacation, I don't call. They don't call me. Yeah. I know when I get back, everything's done. I don't have to worry about it. I mean, on Friday, I go off every Friday. I don't go into the office. I don't call the office. They don't call me. Obviously, clients call, whatever, stuff just gets done. I don't even know about it anymore. I used to want to know everything that was going on. I don't even ask anymore. Yeah. I know it's getting handled. It's getting handled right. Yeah. If somebody is not sure, then they'll let me know and say, hey, Mike, this might be a little bit over my head. Are you sure you want me to do this? And I'm typically, it's like, yeah, I do want you to do it.
That's great. Yeah. That's amazing. Figure it out. Well, and I love that control, responsibility, and authority, which means that they've got decision-making ability. I mean, in reality, so that's a big step too. It's one thing to give somebody control and, hey, you do this, but to make decisions in regard to everything that has to do with that, that's really stepping back and putting a lot of trust in that person.
Yeah, and I mean, it's hard when you start. I mean, it is because you're, like client correspondence, for instance. It used to be I wanted to see everything before it went out. Well, that's terribly ineffective. I mean, it's micromanaging that person, and they're all adults and college educated. I mean, why? However I write an email or a letter or whatever. I mean, my style is certainly different than everybody else's, and everybody else's is different than mine. It's not better. Mine's not better or worse, nor is theirs. It's just different. So yeah, it's hard. The authority part is the hardest because, you're really handing over ownership to somebody else. And it's something that you may have done for years.
Yeah, it's your baby. I mean, this is your thing and your business and your something, right? Like you said, you've done for years, and now you're putting it entirely in somebody's hands. So you understand, you could see why people struggle with it so much because it's just such a mental hurdle to overcome. But what I'm hearing you say is it sounds like one of, if not the biggest game changers and aha moments that turned into a totally transformed business and life. I mean, to be able to go away for 2 weeks and come back and not skip a beat and then go golfing, and, you know, the lifestyle that you have combined with still continued business growth. I mean, that's really everybody's dream.
Yeah, I mean, you know, people listen to this will say, yeah, well, what happened to his business? I mean, in the last 10 years, our business it's done probably a 3X. You know, I mean, that's a lot, right? I mean, just regardless of where it started, 3X is still a good number from there. Yeah. And I work less than maybe less than I've ever worked, but I don't, you know, I work 2.5, 3 days a week.
Yeah.
And we can continue to grow in that stage, right? Mm-hmm. So if, you know, when I started, before I really committed to delegating, as the business grew, like I said at the very beginning, as the business grew, so did my hour commitment to the business, right? Because I was doing everything, and I didn't know how to delegate. And for now, the business could continue to grow, and my time commitment to the business is not increasing. It's because I only do two things. I do client acquisition and relationship management of existing clients. You
just read my mind, because that's what I was going to ask you. So what is on your list that you do? So everything related to client acquisition and client management. Is that what you said?
Yeah. And client management is really just relationship building. Yeah. You know? Yeah. That's really what my responsibility is. Everything else is, I mean, I don't do, and quite honestly, I probably have forgotten how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's, you know, in reality, you're doing the things that you're great at and that you love doing. My guess is that 2.5 to 3 days of work you love. It's not like you're doing stuff that you don't enjoy.
No. And again, to your point, I think my employees are doing things that they enjoy. Yeah. Right. So, I mean, I always tell people, and this is true for me, and it's probably true for you, it's probably true for anybody that'll listen to this, is, look, if you have however many hours, but if you could spend 80% of your time doing things that you really enjoy doing and that you're pretty competent at, and the other 20%, there's always 20% of crap that you have to do. I mean, even I do 20, there's still crap that I get involved with that I probably shouldn't. But 80% of my time, which is a lot, is spent on stuff day to day that I really enjoy doing. And I always tell everybody that, you know, 20%, you just this stuff comes up, somebody's out, whatever, you just have to do that. But if that's the balance, I think that's a pretty good balance. Yeah. 80% is pretty good.
That's incredible. And then, I mean, your quality of life has just got to have, just in terms of your stress going down, your time to spend time with family and friends and do the things you love to do. I mean, my guess is your life 10 years ago versus how it is today, and everything has changed dramatically in a positive way.
It's a lot different.
Yeah,
it is. But there are some things too. I mean, I know some other things that allow you to be a good delegator. There are some things just from a business standpoint that I think you need to try to do, and that I think we've been pretty successful doing. One of them is just to systematize stuff. Right. Since we work with a niche clientele, you know, I mean, everything that we do is pretty standard. So we don't have a lot of one-offs. So it's easier to delegate because there's just not a lot we're doing the same thing over and over again for each different client. It might be a little bit different, but it's generally about the same. And then the other thing is, you know, like I mentioned earlier, is, you know, to get your team, even if your team is one, I mean, I've had this conversation with other people. They have like an administrative assistant or something. And I'm like, look, you could delegate to that person. Just tell them what you're trying to do and ask them the same questions that I mentioned 10 minutes ago. What are some things that I currently do that you think I shouldn't be doing? And they'll tell you. And then the other thing, two other things just for office organization. We also implemented, this helps a lot too. We also implemented just we call it a 3-week rule. And all that is, if a client calls and says, hey, I really want to set an appointment, I need to see you, whatever. If it's an emergency, then this rule will be violated. But just generally speaking, if a client calls and wants to have a meeting or they need us to go somewhere, whatever, we always use the 3-week rule. And it's, what is today? The 27th of July. You know, Mike's available the second week of August. And I may have nothing going on next week, but it doesn't matter. if I say, oh yeah, Mike's available on Friday, then that which is what I used to do, that would just create chaos in the office, because suddenly I would need everybody to drop everything. And I'm like, hey, we need to get this together by Friday, which is the day after tomorrow.
Yeah.
Versus Mike, how about August 10th? That's the first day Mike's available.
Yeah.
And when we started that, it was hard because my staff was like, Mike, there's no way clients are going to allow that. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, if I call my dentist or my doctor, I mean, I can't get in tomorrow.
Right. Exactly.
Why are we on call all the time? Why not let's try it, see if it works.
Right.
And now it always works, because now if a client calls, I mean, they don't call me to set an appointment because I don't do that. Yeah. But if they call my assistant or call my office, that's what they'll say. Oh yeah, I know Mike likes to go out a couple of weeks. Is he available like August 10th?
Yeah.
And they'll be like, yeah, actually August 10th works perfect.
Well, it's interesting. I love that rule. And there is, in reality, there's a perception in people's mind, or misperception, that the faster or more available you are, the less successful that you are. So my guess is that also gives the right impression too. I mean, hey, if you're not booked, I know if I call somebody and they're not available for 3 weeks, my thought is, okay, well, they must be really successful. Right, wrong, or indifferent, that's sometimes how our brain works. But I love your point about the chaos too, because there are a lot of people that operate, and I'm one of them. A lot of times it's like, okay, if we can do it in a week, let's do it in a week versus 2 or 3. But I hear what you're saying, because it keeps a good cadence for the business. It keeps a good cadence for your team. And that's a really important factor versus, okay, we're in 6th gear this week and 2nd gear next week. That's got to drive a team nuts in reality, trying to constantly adapt and adjust.
Yeah. And then the last thing is, I think the other thing is what's good for me is good for everybody else. So we really try, when people do go on vacation, staff goes on vacation, the expectation for them when they come back from vacation is the same for when I come back from vacation. So we all circle around and, we try to make sure they don't have any mail, they don't have any emails, they don't have any voicemails. So everybody's participating in the same process. Because it's no good if I'm the only one that comes back, and it's great when I come back, but when they come back, they're like, oh crap, I've got all these emails and this pile of paper and all these voicemails. So we do try to incorporate that for everybody when people are on vacation.
Yeah. Excellent. I like that. My guess is your team likes that.
Yeah. I think it's just it makes it more of a team effort. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. So what do you see down the road? What's your vision? Any big plans and aspirations with the business in 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, in 5 or 10 years, hopefully, I have a son that's younger, graduated from college. Hopefully he comes in and joins the firm, and firm continues to grow. And, instead of working 2 or 3 days a week, I work 1 or 2. And again, maybe at that point, I'm doing 95% of the stuff I really like to do. So at that point, I could work, another 10, 20 years and probably be really happy. But, then it's just making sure that all these processes that we have in place continue. And I don't think, I'm confident that they will, because I think, people see the benefit. And again, if everybody's doing the 80% of stuff that they like to do, for employees, it is a job. I get that, right? They'd probably rather not work, but since they have to work, it's a pretty good environment. They all get paid. I pay really, really well. That's another thing I think, is to compensate people maybe a little above, just to make sure you get good quality people and you don't have turnover. Turnover is the killer, right? Because turnover is, it's just like getting a new client. It's way easier to keep a client that we currently have than to get a new one.
Right. Yeah.
And I think employees are the same. If you have really good employees, if you have to overpay them a little bit, I just think that just makes total sense.
Yeah.
The opposite doesn't make sense. That continually, we all know guys or girls that we know that own businesses, and they just always complain about turnover. And turnover is either 2 things: either people hate the working environment that they're in, or they're not being compensated fairly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Any other mistakes that you see business owners make, or financial advisors, or really any industry? Any other words of wisdom, that cautionary words, or anything that you see people do that is ultimately slowing them down?
People don't want to change. So yeah. I think, no one's like, for instance, you're going to have how many people listen to this podcast? So I would say, if you just think about what we talked about, we talked about standardize your process, ask your staff for help, create a list of things you're not going to do, the 3-week rule, the vacation rules for all your staff, the making sure that you're doing work that's consistent with what it is you're getting paid. Mm-hmm. And to do that, you just need to figure out about what your hourly wage is if you were paid hourly. I would just tell people, do one of them next week. Mm-hmm. Right? Because the easy thing is you listen to this, you're like, oh, that's great, all that. And then, 2 weeks go by, 3 weeks go by. Next thing you know, it's freaking January and you're like, you haven't done anything and you're in the same mess. Mm-hmm. It's hard. Take a baby step. Just do one. Say, whatever one of those. And just know it's hard. I mean, delegating is hard because you have to trust the person that you're delegating to. But I think people would be surprised. Mm-hmm. At how much ownership people will take if they're empowered and they know you trust them. Mm-hmm. I think I don't think people make mistakes. I just think people don't like change. And but look, if you're working too much and you're working too many hours, your business is growing, and you don't think your staff's fully engaged or whatever, I would ask it. Just sit down with them and ask them. Say, hey, there's a simple question. What are some things that I do that you don't think I should do? Mm-hmm. People, they'll tell you, and you'll be shocked. Yeah. I was. I mean, yeah. And again, I just think people don't like. It's easy not to do anything, but if I hadn't done anything and I'd go on vacation, and it'd be the same, right? I'd come back and it'd be a disaster. It's almost not even worth going on. I mean, I hear people say that it's not even worth going on vacation.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, this started with you hiring a coach that gave you advice that you implemented and took action on, and then you kept going and kept going. But you're right. People listening to this podcast, it's 30 minutes of great stuff. Take one of these things and do something with it. Because I'm writing down a whole list. There's stuff that I'm going to do as a result of our conversation. I think it's dynamite stuff, and you're spot on. So thanks for sharing all that.
Yeah,
that's been great. So I know you've got your LinkedIn profile. I think you have your website. If people want to learn more about you, they want to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I'm going to just go to our website. It's just Mammini, Mammini.com. www, I guess. I don't even know if you need that anymore. In fairness, I don't even know what our website looks like because, surprise. I'm not involved in it at all. I don't think I've looked at it in years, but apparently somebody keeps up to date. And I don't even do my LinkedIn. Somebody sends out LinkedIn stuff. I have somebody in my office that sends out LinkedIn blurbs. I don't know. I don't even know how often they do, but on some regular basis, we send something out.
That's all right, man. If you said anything different, I would think, okay, that's you're not delegating right. So that goes perfectly with what we talked about. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining, Mike. Honestly, this has been phenomenal, and I know we're going to see each other hopefully in September at the Wealth Management Forum. I hope. If not, we'll see each other sometime when I'm out your way. But this has been dynamite. Really appreciate it.
Right on. Thanks, John.
You got it. And thanks, everybody, for joining today's episode of Tomorrow's Leader. As always, make sure you like, subscribe, give a thumbs up, share. Always appreciate your comments and suggestions on future topics and future guests. Great ones like Mike here today. Make sure you direct message me or give me a buzz, email me with your suggestions, and go down below, give a 5-star review. Always appreciate that. Look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, everybody.